Well, hello. Welcome, everyone. This is a great opportunity one more time. I'm joined by Emily Moyer for the third time, if I'm not mistaken. Super happy to have you back again on the show, Emily. We're going to do as it tends to happen. We're going to kind of improvise, but we did speak a little bit just now to get a few pointers or whatever to as to what we're going to explore. So, hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you again. It's been a little while.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it has. And yeah, we were speaking that there's been some, I don't know if advances or anything, but kind of the world's, now we have we're going to go a little bit more than perhaps the other times into the COVID thing. Um, and there's been like updates or new developments in the story. I would say, like people are now starting. People are scared again. It was like very scared at the start. Then it was like a few rational people started realizing, oh well, it's not as bad as it seemed. Then all the stuff about the potential of it being fake or what's the name, a psyop, right? A thing to make you think something. And I would say that now it's kind of started, the graph of fear has started going up a little bit again, but I don't think as much as before. um, but what I see a little is that um, less people perhaps are scared, or there's a few people that I think I sense are more scared than at the start. But there's more people who have given it some kind of have been able to contextualize it, as there's been so many months going since this started, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting. We're kind of into like a whole different phase of this. And I got a really good glimpse of this because I just returned from a cross country trip. We were in like 8 or 10 states or something. And every place you go, the rules are different. And then the way the people are handling the rules is different. And then the attitudes of the people are different. Right. And so, and then coming back here to California during the period of time that we were gone, there was like a new lockdown kind of thing imposed. And so, like, I'm not really interested in debating the merits of, like, does it exist? Does it not exist? Is it real? Is it fake? Because it's both real and fake. And, I don't think you're going to change people's minds on that issue about whether it's real or fake. I think, like, the area where the discussion can happen is, like, does reality match what we're being told, right? Do your observations line up with the narrative that's being given out? And then, like, okay, so let's just go out on a limb and say that it's as real as they say it is. Well, what is actually a beneficial thing to do about it? And let's have a conversation about, like, quality of life as part of the solution. Because, like, even if it was the realest thing in the world and super duper dangerous, like, I'm not interested in living in my house for the rest of my life. So for some people that might be a chance that they're willing to risk, and we have to have a conversation about that kind of stuff as well. So I think what you're saying, like, obviously, as case numbers continue to go up, right? Like, because that's a reality. Case numbers are going up, but of course they are, because what we have is actually a case-demic, not a pandemic, right? There's never been any, not in our lifetimes anyway, right? Any other virus or disease where they've done all this testing, right? So had they done all this testing every year for every cold and every flu, this might seem just normal, an average, right? But there's all this testing going on, and the threshold for what they consider to be positive is ridiculous, right? They're amplifying, like, the testing material to a level to be able to see the sort of, I don't know what the terminology is, but to be able to see the RNA of the virus to a level that is unreasonable, right? And so most cases that test positive don't actually have symptoms. So is that really a case? So there's all of that kind of stuff going on, right? And so, like, the question that I would really ask people there are a couple of things. Like, this is the main thing that I'm seeing this week. I'm seeing some people here in California who before were very enthusiastic start to question things and push back a little. Even people on the left who up until this point had been very like, you know, pro-mask, pro-shutdown, pro-coronavirus. But with this sort of second round of business lockdowns and no restaurants and stuff like that, you know, people are starting to get pissed because they're losing their businesses. But also they're starting to see the hypocrisy, right? Like, and this is one that I'm using to point it out to people who still can't see it, right? Like, Gavin Newsom is the governor of California, right? He's obviously got some inside baseball. He's in the meetings where they're deciding what the policies for the law, you know, or what the mandates or whatever are going to be, right? He talks to quote unquote the experts and all that kind of stuff. If there was something really scary going on, he wouldn't go out to dinner at the French Laundry for a 12-course meal without a mask on, even if he was allowed to. If he really believed it was as dangerous as he's telling all of us it was, he's not stupid. He doesn't want to die. I mean, maybe he is, but like, you know, so when you see, and it's literally almost every governor and almost every mayor are doing things that violate the guidelines that they're saying the rest of us have to live under. Now, put aside for a moment that wealthy people and people involved in government always do that, but they usually just do it around like financial stuff and, you know, whatever, right? But this is supposedly a pandemic and a very, very dangerous disease. I don't know about you, but like, no matter how much I viewed myself as like separate from the regular people, if I really believed there was a dangerous thing out there, I wouldn't go out. So they obviously don't believe that. And I don't think there needs to be like much, like that's the place where the observation doesn't match the narrative, right? And I think that people are slowly starting to see that. Like people who, you know, liked the idea of believing in the virus and the lockdown because it seemed like part of an anti-Trump strategy. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's very weird. But I think at this point, because Trump, you know, Biden has won, and that is, you know, being anti-Trump is not as necessary as it was a few weeks ago. Like the reality of the fact that like we live in a multi-tiered society, which isn't that much different than the caste system in India, only we have like fancier stuff, you know, and more toys and technology and dumb shit that you don't actually need. I think that reality is starting to hit home for some people. And so then we're into a really interesting phase here because till now, the only people who were hard to convince were right-wingers and conspiracy theorists, and now the so-called, you know, intellectual left wing are starting to go, right? So we're into an interesting phase. It'll be interesting to sort of see what happens. And also, there's been so much news coming out last week about how invalid the tests really are, and then also about how the many, many weaknesses of the various vaccines that are being proposed. So people I know who are total mainstream normies, like they wouldn't even consider taking the vaccine based on the publicly mainstream available reports on it, right? So I think that the COVID world order is in a little bit of trouble, not a lot yet, but I think, you know, if people have any sense left at all, then this level of the psyop anyway won't be able to continue for too much longer.
And I think there's like so much going on in different levels of reality. Not to become too esoteric, but I keep remembering about the special time that's coming up, you know, concerning, first of all, we have an eclipse in a few days. Then there's the stuff with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. Yeah. There's the solstice, or whatever it's called, the end of the year, the 25th of December. There's like this last month of the year is going to be very, very weird, as it's been for the last couple of months, but even more, I think. And for example, here as I was telling you before, I don't watch TV. I don't own a TV, so and I don't generally go into newspapers to look for information. I'm very intuitive, so I kind of pick up stuff from from my surroundings, from my context, and I have a way of, I don't know, of processing with just a few bits of information. I can extrapolate. It's not that I'm right at all, but I get a kind of picture that seems valid for me, at least, and I'm sensing that people are like scared, but at the same time they're starting to wake up. They, like you were mentioning before, it's like people are like sensing there's something that's not jiving with me, but I'm still scared. It's like the reptilian brain is activated, but
Yeah.
also the other part is like, well, but is it really as dangerous as you think, or as you're being told? And
Yeah.
people are in that dilemma, I think, within them. So, like, for example, with Christmas and all that stuff coming up, people are most likely, I don't know, but probably not going to get together, the families, or perhaps do like smaller gatherings instead of like the whole family. The different parts of the family will get together, perhaps. and it's so crazy. I mean, all this stuff, I told you before we started, it kind of makes me a little bit angry, because it's so weird. I never thought I would be living uh, a time when actually, um, a covert, I don't even, I'm kind of scared sometimes to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
I've seen many people that get like, I mean, I'm nobody, but some people get censored and stuff. So there seems to be some kind of behind the scenes control in all of this. And I never thought that it would come to this. There was like 9/11, and like almost immediately I think people started waking up to it, and it was like stopped on its tracks. Then I remember, like, in 2013, I think it was, the Syria stuff.
Yeah.
They were like on the verge of going to war, and people kind of woke up to it, and they stopped it. It didn't go far. So I thought it would be like, after that initial couple of months, it would like stop there, and then eventually there would be another new thing to, but this has gone far, a lot more than I suspected it would. So it's kind
Mhm.
of scary.
I think so it's interesting. So I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I think that they had been trying for a long time to find the one that would work the best to scare the most
They've
people.
been looking for the thing in the armor, right? The clink in the armor.
Yeah, because do you know who Dave Mcgowan is?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so he passed away a couple of years ago, but he is really well known for a book he wrote called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, where he talked about how all of the like hippie music of the 60s and 70s was brought to us by children whose parents were part of like military intelligence or covert operations or whatever, right? That's what he's most famous for. But he also wrote a very interesting book called Programmed to Kill that talked about the serial killer phenomenon and how it really was more political in nature than it was like some weird epidemic where there was all these people who go around and kill all these people, right? And in his later years, he wrote that book like probably 15 years ago. In his later years, in his final years, he really, actually all along, but certainly in the last 10 years, he got into breaking down a lot of these sort of, I don't know that he would refer to them as false flags or hoaxes, but he would refer to them as like managed events, maybe, or staged events, or hybrid kind of events, right? And the last thing he did right before he died was a breakdown of the Boston bombing. And he was a very good researcher, and he just didn't have that same sort of easy to attack sort of like conspiratorial right-wing persona that so many people in the alternative media do have. So he was more dangerous in some ways, but in his book, Programmed to Kill, and then in the kinds of research he did for the years following. And I recommend people familiarize themselves with his work. His website is archived, even though he passed away. It's like a weird website address, but you can just look up Dave McGowan's website and it'll show you, take you to it. He talked about how it was kind of fascinating how like we had all these like serial killers from like the late 60s into like the, you know, maybe early 90s, 2000 time, right? And then there was no more of that. And then suddenly we were on to school shootings or terrorism, right? But like what happened to all the serial killers? And like now there's no more school shootings. Like even before obviously with COVID, there's no school, so there's no school shootings. But even in the last couple of years, we saw a lot less school shootings and things than we were seeing before. And so each one of these phenomena has a fairly easily identifiable, if you look past the surface, political agenda attached to it. And the attachment is always basically fear and then restriction on freedom attached to the fear that they're able to create, whether that restriction on freedom is international travel or gun control or vaccination or financial or whatever it is, right? And so I think what happened is like, you know, the political agenda for the serial killer stuff had two things: run its course, the things that they could accomplish the things they could, and the things they couldn't, they got tired of trying. They moved on to another one with the terrorism and the school shootings, right? No matter how hard they tried for gun control, they weren't able to really do that. So they moved on to some other stuff. And one of the things I think that they recognized is like, you know, with the school shooting, it's still only a few hundred people in the school. But when you're talking widespread pandemic and hundreds of thousands or millions of cases, it's suddenly more fearful to people. Like if a person doesn't go to school or doesn't, you know, do anything where they're in large groups of people, like a school shooting or a bombing isn't scary to them, right? But if you can catch a deadly disease from your next door neighbor and you wouldn't know by looking at them that they have it, that terrifies people who are not easily scared for any lengthy period of time by the other things, right? So I think they had like, you know, each of these things accomplished something, but I think they were looking for one that not only would scare everybody in terms of like how they chose to manage their own behavior, but would actually get the public to start enforcing their beliefs on other people, right? Like, and so think about, I mean, I don't know if you've experienced it there because I think things are much different in Uruguay than here, but people, like if you walk in somewhere where everyone else is wearing a mask and you're not wearing a mask, they all look at you like you have the Black Plague or like you're, you know, like a Nazi or a terrorist or something like that, right? Like that we've never experienced that before. The only thing I think that is like, is close to that, and it's been recent, is like, depending on the neighborhood you live in, if you have a Trump sign or something in your yard, then you might get treated like that, right? And it's funny that this sort of Trump and the masking thing went together, right? Kind of, you know, whatever. So, so I think that's it. I think they have been experimenting with what would actually scare people and make them okay with a great deal of change. And then the other thing is, I don't know if you listen to Catherine Austin Fitts, but she talks about this a lot, right? So we've had a couple of times, like one of the main things that people don't often realize was associated with 9/11 was that there was like a lot of money that went missing, right? And everybody forgot about that because they were just concerned with all these people who had died on 9/11. But just the day before 9/11, you know, you have Donald Rumsfeld on the floor of Congress talking about there's missing $2.1 trillion or whatever it is, right? Like nobody really followed up on that, you know? And then now what Catherine was talking about is like all of people's like pension and retirement funds and stuff like that, they're not actually there. They're just saying they're there, but that money has been spent. And so they needed to come up with something that would serve as an excuse or a distraction, right, for why that money won't be there when people go to collect on it in the future. So now you have a situation where people who work their whole life will not have their pension, but when you tell, they will believe that, oh, it's because of COVID, right, and at least we survived that, so we're all, you know, it's an excuse as to why people will be poor in the future, right, like from her financial expertise and perspective and whatnot. So I think a lot of these, like, they're just searching for the circumstance that provides cover for the most holes in their system.
It seems so crazy that they would we always talk about they, but that they would be like there's like this I don't know if it's a focus group or something like that, where they go like, oh well, let's do this pandemic, or let's do terrorism, or blah blah blah, and then they explore and see, oh okay, so we can cover all of these things with this event, we can cover these other things with that. It seems kind of like that. And I don't know if you've watched, it recently came out, this show called Utopia. It's
No, but it's been recommended to me, so it's on my list.
Yeah, it's worth it. It's pretty short, I think 6 episodes. And well, there's I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's this moment when they do something like this, you know.
Yes.
And it's so surreal, you know. It's like every day that goes by, you're more like, am I living in a film, in a dream, in a movie, something like that, and you know, I try to return the because if I focus on this stuff a lot, I mean, I get into a really bad mood, you know, and I don't think that's useful or valid for myself, or for the people around me, and for the work that I'm trying to do in you know, in sound healing and helping people to remember who we are, to remember our inner power. But of course, I'm also living a human experience, and I also have fears and have desires and attachments. And I don't know what my point was on that, but that I get scared too, and I sometimes don't really know. I try, like, perhaps it's kind of a denial, but I try like not to focus so much on all this stuff, and I try to go to solutions and to ways of improving myself, to expand some light through
Okay,
the work.
so a couple of things. So I want to address what you said about planning all these things and movie scripts and whatever, but I also want to address what you just said. So I'll start with this one and I'll go back to the other two. So I know you're into like yoga and meditation and breathing and stuff like that. So I'm going to assume you've read the Bhagavad Gita.
Mm-hmm.
You read it? Yeah. Okay. So I can't remember the characters, which one was which now, right? But there's the point where I forget which chapter it's in, where like the one character like sees. Yes, it's a great book, the Bhagavad Gita. I read it a while back, and so I'm gonna butcher this because it's right, but like the one character sees all the many faces of the other character. Like all of a sudden he like turns into a monster and like sees all these things and whatnot, and then he eventually goes back to his normal thing, but he can't unsee what he's seen, right? So there we go.
That's the scene.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there we go. So like this is kind of like like this process you're talking about like you look and it's scary and whatever. Like this is like it's like that chapter of the book, but it's very long. It's like chapter 8. I can't remember which chapter it is, right? But you know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So, and if anybody who's ever done any psychedelics, you've also seen some of these kinds of things where it's like you're looking at something beautiful and all of a sudden it looks terrifying and scary, and then it's beautiful again and then terrifying. And you're like, what the fuck is going on, right? Like, you know, and so it's like an extended dark night of the soul kind of thing, or an extended like the part of the vision quest or the shamanic journey where you're having to fight off the evil spirits that are really you, right? Or like when you're in the Bardo, if you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead and you're trying to walk towards the light, but every time you walk towards the bright white light, something scary comes, so you turn back, and then it makes it a longer journey to get to the white light. And if you would just like hold your horses and not get too scared, you'd have made it on the first trek or whatever, but it's all part of the process, right? So like, I don't like immersing, like for many of us, like at some point in our awakening journey, we immerse ourselves in this information and it becomes sort of destructive. And then there's the point where like you realize what's happening. So you pull back a little bit and you get balance. And then there comes the point where like you find this humorous. And it's not that it's not true and serious, right? When you get to the point that you can like both like laugh at yourself and take yourself seriously and understand that like the world is in a very serious, perilous situation. And it's also very, very humorous that like in such an advanced technological society, we have some of the stupid behavior and fears, right? So when you get to the place where you can hold all the ideas simultaneously and it's at a different level for different people. But it's very important that you be more amused by what's going on than terrified or disturbed by it. And it's not because there's no level of terror or disturbed that there's, this is truth, but there's like an oiling or like a lubrication or a greasing that happens when you laugh and when you're amused by it that allows you to sort of move along. And when you hit that point, that's actually like when you're really like not just awake, but like aware and empowered in a different way, right? Like I don't pay attention as to as many details and streams of information and articles and videos as I used to because I understand what they all are now. I still keep myself current. I look at enough, but I also understand what the balance is for me to still be able to laugh and sort of ride the wave instead of like crashing and burning every time, right? So I think that's like an important part of this journey, to like find that space. And when you're at least equally, if not more amused by it than you are frightened by it, then you're there, right? And then to what you said about, they planning stuff and plotting it out. Yeah, that's what like that there's intelligence agencies and think tanks, right? And these people are paid to sit around all day and just tinker with these little ideas. Well, what if we did this? If we did this, let's try this, right? That's actually part of the reason that Michael and I started the Project Kids thing, and we're going to start expanding it in some different directions. We want to, Randy and I used to talk about this, but it didn't quite materialize about the idea of creating a think tank or an intelligence agency for people like us. Michael and I are working on this now, and it's like, unfortunately, we don't have the endless backing of the government and rich people, so we're going to have to fund this project ourselves with time and donations and whatever. But we need, if I had all day to just sit around and tinker with the funny ideas in my mind, right, we can get onto something. I mean, I think Michael and I demonstrate that in every show we do because we find these very interesting threads of information that seem to connect to something. And the people who are doing these events and whatever, these capers and abracadabras on us, like they have figured out, by tinkering how to sort of do this. So like if they can do it, we can do it too. Now we're not going to do it to, trick, fool, enslave, and rob people. We're going to do it to entertain and free people and whatever, right? But it's that idea of like really, playing with stuff. And then as to what you said about script writing, I learned from a gentleman, I think his name is Wes Penre, Penre, that the intelligence agencies do employ script writers, and not just for like, we all know about how, there will be a movie that showed about 9/11 before it came out, or on The Simpsons or South Park or whatever. There's that, the predictive programming and all that kind of stuff, but there's also literally the think tanks and intelligence agencies hire script writers to like write out possible ideas that then they use those as the drills or the false flags or whatever, right? Because they know that like in order for something to be bought into, it has to stir up the emotions of the people the same way a movie does, right? There are literally people out there that like their whole life is about like Harry Potter or Star Wars or something like that, right? So if you can get the same people that write that stuff to write you your false flag narrative, then more people are going to buy into it than some dry, boring documentary style version of it, right? So I think that's, definitely been a tactic for a long time. And then I think sometimes we get some of those products as movies, series, with a few things changed from how they used it in real life, or, something slightly dramatized or whatever, or much, much later after the fact, or so far before the fact that nobody would ever conceive that this could be a real thing. So we receive that as entertainment, and if we like it and we clap for it, then they know that it worked, right? So, yeah. I
I
talk
love
all the time.
I loved what you said about the laughter thing. And yeah, I see myself as perhaps still in a process of finding that balance. I
Hmm.
I totally the like what you call the kind of hero's journey that you described, you know,
Yeah.
of diving deep into the stuff and becoming very much affected by it, and then just understanding, well, okay, I need some distance from this because it's really really hard on the way that you look at the world after you understand, okay, so this crazy stuff is real, all right.
Yeah.
And now I see myself, and I still get kind of angry, so I try not to look at it so much, but you connecting it to that scene in the Bhagavad Gita helped
Mhm.
me helped me give some more context and perspective as to what my attitude can be towards this stuff. um, and I was thinking now as you were speaking, I wanted to show you something, but I have it kind of not hidden, what you call it, stored. So I might take a moment to fetch it, but I think it
Okay.
could be interesting. It's
Yeah.
connected. You said like how and the scripting thing, how they sometimes create like the idea, for example, of 9/11 before it happens. They put it in a movie and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and that made me think of something that I will tell you when I have the thing, not to ruin the surprise. Okay, and I'll be
Okay.
right back. Okay, give me just a minute. I'm gonna
Okay.
pause this. There we go. I'm
All
here.
right.
Thank you for waiting, first of all.
All right. It looks like we have a very colorful Masonic floor there or
Yeah,
something
no,
like
it's this is
that.
protection for the thing I want to show you, which I think is connected to what we were speaking and people were listening just maybe 1 second ago, but for us it was
Okay.
2 minutes. And here we go. Okay, so
Oh, wow.
can you see the whole thing?
Yeah. Did you paint that?
Yeah, I painted this.
Oh, wow.
It must be like 97, something like that.
Yeah.
And so the most remarkable thing for me was when I returned to watch to watch this stuff. Like one day I went through all the paintings that I did as a kid,
Yeah.
and this is like the thing that I was trying to speak. This is clearly Chrysler building, right?
Yeah.
It's not the Twin Towers, it's a Chrysler building. But I
Yeah.
mean, for me as a kid, this represented New York, I guess,
Yeah.
because it's a very unique kind of building. So
Yeah.
there's this, and there's, can you see the plane?
Yeah. Yeah. How old were you? What year did you do that in?
Probably 97, something like that.
Okay, so you were already feeling it, picking up on it. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's incredible how like so so long before the vibration or something
Yeah.
reached me in another country, you know. So how long before must they have been juggling with all these ideas?
Yeah. Okay. So that, first of all, of course, like when an idea is put out there, even if it's put out in private,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the universe is like a machine that takes in all this stuff, and you can't. There really is no privacy, right? If you're talking about something, there's somebody somewhere picking up on it, whether they're spying or surveilling, or they're just telepathic or intuitive or remote viewers or whatever it is, right? So there's that. But the other interesting thing about that painting, so you had that, but then you also have this man split in half,
Mm-hmm.
one a very modern technological like version, and then one like a much more like primitive, primordial, attached to nature. It's the same person. So it makes me think of a couple of things. Like, first of all, whenever like I have a psychedelic experience or something like that, like sometimes like the person you're with, you'll look at them sometimes and they look like a Native American little boy running around, and other times they look just like they normally look, or whatever. They might look like a different gender or kind of like an animal or something like that, right? So that's represented there. But also, like, I had this one experience one time at a party that I've spoken about many, many times in terms of like the download that I got about encryption and some of the Edward Snowden stuff. But at that same event, right, like I had a view of myself as like this place was out in nature that I was, but I was almost like sort of a futuristic or a technological being in this nature setting, right, where like my eyes and like points on my face and stuff would kind of light up, like there was lights behind them, or like technological, right, but like more of an organic technology, and there would be certain like sparkles or gems or whatever on my face. I don't know why, like I just had this vision of myself. And like later when I was home, and I've talked about how I used to like look up on different websites trying to look for a vision like what I saw, I found this picture of a girl that actually looked, it was the screensaver on my phone forever, and then like when one of my phones broke, it didn't transfer, and I haven't been able to find it. But there was this picture of a girl who looked just like me, and in all those places that I had seen like the technological stuff, right, like almost like lights or implants or something, there was like a butterfly and a flower and a bug and a whatever. It looked exactly the same as the vision I had, but like the organic natural version versus the technological version, right? Like it was so weird. And so both parts of ourself exist. Like we are these very interesting beings that are like a come together of, you know, nature and technology. Like I know of people who watch my series with Sonia Barrett. Like a lot of people in the beginning are very put off by some of her ideas that we're technologies and we're living in a game. It sounds like a cheapening of this experience, but that's not what she means at all. And when people really begin to understand what she's talking about, that's why people become, you know, followers or members of her group or attendees of her workshops for life once they sort of get it, right? Because there aren't very many other, like the transhumanism is a perversion of what she's talking about. There aren't very many other sort of like entities or beings or species that are able to sort of combine these ideas, right? Use of like this sort of technological existence and organic existence. Like, you know, like there's no like animal out there using a smartphone or their computer or whatever, unless they're being forced to by a human, right? You know, and there's no robot who's like, I just need a day in nature, right? It's only humans that have both sort of existences, right? And so I think your picture captures that incredibly well too. You know, it's really really an interesting painting and really good.
Yeah, I used to love painting. I went to this school, and yeah, and every week I would do something from painting, sculpture, lots of different stuff. And yeah, it really was a very nice thing for me that helped me develop so much of what now I understand as my intuition and my creativity, and to express what was within me. And yeah, that I didn't even know why I was painting that. I don't really remember like why I chose to paint that, but there was clearly something inside me that wanted to process the idea that there are two kind of natures within me and within humanity, I guess. And for some reason that plane and the Chrysler Building, they crashed the party and they ended up appearing. And what you were saying about Sonia's philosophy, let's say, for me it was very much a resonance with what she was speaking when I think I heard her first of all in your show. I resonated immediately because at the time I had been reading stuff like the Bhagavad Gita and studying Hinduism and Vedanta and stuff like that, and Buddhism, and it's like the same thing expressed in technological terms. So it's the Maya, the illusion, is the simulated reality, or the game. And sometimes it gets so not real is not the way, but it gets you, you know, sometimes, and you forget that it's a game, that it's an illusion. You get so invested in it, and it kind of it kind of makes promises, you know, and you you buy into them, and you tend to forget that nothing that's out there will really fulfill what you're trying to fulfill by buying that promise. Yeah. And
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know just now you brought up about how this art school helped you to sort of tap into your intuitions and stuff like that. Before we started recording, you told me you wanted to ask me some questions about, we were talking a little bit about like crystals and then intuition. And I know that you had some stuff maybe you wanted to ask me about that. So I wanted to remind you so you wouldn't forget.
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, this part that we just did about COVID and all the conspiracies and the craziness. I mean, like I said before, I kind of tend to shy away from speaking about it because I'm still perhaps in that process of learning to really laugh about it, or to laugh more about it, and
Yeah.
I don't want to, to put bad vibes out there, and I'd rather until I have learned to laugh about it. I don't want to really get too much into it.
Yeah.
And I know you also wanted to know a little bit more of how it is here in Uruguay, that stuff. So if you want, we can also jump back and forth between the questions that I have and the ones you do.
Let's do your questions first, and then we can go to. I just have some questions about in general, like not so much just COVID stuff. I have questions about Uruguay because I think people are starting to look at other places as they decide how they're going to navigate the new reality based on the fucking COVID shit. But it isn't really about the, So let's go with your stuff first, and then we'll finish up with the sort of reality of our homes.
Well, what I was the reason why I was interested in asking is because in one of your shows that you're doing with Mcgowan, he mentioned that he started doing stuff with crystals, or like having them around or going out with them. So I don't know, for some reason I started doing the same. I feel resonance with Michael. He like, I don't know, I don't know how to explain it, but he mentioned it, and I have crystals here at home, but they're just like, for me, until a few weeks ago, they were just like, I don't know, like what do you call it, like stuff that you just have around the house for, because they're pretty stuff. And there was always this kind of intuition, of course, of and some research that I've done into the power of them, and certain stones work better for this or for that, but never really dug deep into it. But since watching that, I got this kind of desire, or whatever, this pull towards them. So I've started going out. I was showing you before with some stones, some crystals in my pockets, and I felt like I go to face some certain situations that I need to do, and stuff I need to do outside or whatever, and I don't know, I kind of feel like perhaps it's just a boost in my confidence, some kind of placebo, because I have but I really think there is something in them that kind of, for me it feels like they draw some energy into them in a way. So if I have to go and do something that's a bit stressful or whatever, I feel less stressed in the situation, and even more present, and a bit more grounded. I feel like the situation would have gone differently if I didn't have and worse perhaps if I didn't have the crystals with me.
Right.
Like dealing with especially with stressful situations, when you have to and particularly during this year, when you have to interact with people, and they're in a very different frequency, they are very scared, or they are very judgmental and stuff. So I think in that episode you kind of gave some idea that a little bit about crystals, and we were speaking before. You said you're also very much in the intuitive kind of knowledge that you have around them. So yeah, maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm definitely like, there's some people out there that like can identify every crystal and know all the properties of it and know about how it's formed and all that kind of stuff. That's not me. I don't have that kind of knowledge about crystals, but I do feel like I have some sort of intuitive, knowingness. I don't even know if knowledge is the right word, because knowledge in some ways implies that like you've done a lot of studying or research about it. And while I've done some, I wouldn't say that like I'm as deeply learned about it as a lot of other people. But I have an intuitive knowingness about them that I think comes from a couple of places. So first of all, since I was very, very, very small, right, I have always been attracted to things that sort of shimmer and reflect and create like a prism or a rainbow or a spectrum of colors. I was not attracted to sparkles or glitter per se, unless they threw off the full prism, right? Like if you just put a piece of red glitter on my thing from, when we were little and we'd go to kindergarten, we'd make a painting and they'd put glitter. Like I was only interested in the one that iridescent. It was iridescent, not the one that was just sparkly red or sparkly green. Like I was always interested in something that cast a colorful reflection on another surface, or that created kind of a like a spectrum or a prismatic effect that was almost, it could be disorienting even, right? But that sort of like almost had this like change of reality effect. So I was attracted to that from the time I was a kid, and one could say that that was part of my programming, because as a child I was in a movie called Rainbow, right? And for people who are familiar with Wizard of Oz programming or Project Bluebird, this idea of going over the rainbow is part of how they sort of get you into like alter or other reality. So I think that it's probably partially my natural attraction to that, but also that natural attraction was probably played on through programming or vice versa. Maybe I like it because it was part of my programming or whatever. So like I've been really fascinated with that. And like there's some people who will say like they're fascinated by like rainbows in the sky right after it rains or whatever. But I think equally as beautiful that the rainbow that you get when, how you'll see somebody like they'll have like a CD in their car and it'll leave the rainbow reflection on the mirror, and you can even sometimes see it in the next car. It's equally as beautiful, right? And so like there's something about like that generation of a light spectrum of the full range of colors that to me has always just been super magical. And so like I've played with that my entire life, right? And I notice it like whenever a spectrum or a prismatic effect is shown in any TV series or in any movie, I think it's intentional. If people go back and watch like Fringe, almost any time they were sort of switching realities or like changing mainframes, there would be like a prismatic effect across the screen. Like it does shift your consciousness and your reality a bit, right? And if you watch some of the like FPV angel videos I've been talking about lately, and the way that they're describing how the inner workings of the machine that is our Earth are reflected in the sky as like sundogs and halos and prisms and stuff like that, it's kind of fascinating. It's sort of evidence of something happening, right? Like of something magical or something mechanical that is like very advanced happening. It could be either, it could be both, or, I don't know. I've always loved it. So I think that these crystals, like they're the remnants, or the, like, when you do some work on the computer, you leave like a digital trail, right, on your computer, on the internet, or whatever. And there's a reason why our computers, like the storage aspect of them, are like, they have crystal properties, right? Like watches, computers, all that kind of stuff. Silicone, it's crystalline, it has those same characteristics. It's really good for storing information. So I think like all of these like rocks, we find them in interesting geological places. And I think the different kinds are found in different places based on the things that have gone on there. And then there's a few different kinds of rocks in each place, and each one stores a different kind of information, right? Maybe one might store information that's more temporal in nature, right? Where others might store the information that is more geological. It's I don't know how it works. I don't know what the different properties mean in terms of like the type of information that's being stored. Like, you know, we all have like different files on our computer. We have files for our bills, files for our creative project, files for our work project, you know, files for our photos. I don't know if the crystals are the same. They might be, right? And then I think that also you see this effect like in the way technology creates other things that mimic that, right? So we already talked about the things in the watches and the computer, but I'd say like a couple of the things that are really used to engineer human behavior, sugar, drugs like methamphetamine, right? They're crystalline in nature. They have, I mean, you can go like look up crystal meth and you'll see pictures of stuff that looks like crystals, right? Like that is kind of interesting that like this drug that is, you know, very, very destructive, you know, or whatnot, like why does it look exactly like a quartz crystal, which is like this amazing relic of nature, right? And like sugar looks like that too. And we know that like sugar is not really very good for you, but it looks like something that we're attracted to. I think the reason people are attracted to candy, remember rock candy from when we were little? The rock candy, do you have that there?
That you would put like a foot and a lollipop, you know?
Yeah.
And it had this kind of dust and it would explode in your mouth. Is that the
right,
one?
There's also like rock candy. Like, let me just pull a piece up of rock candy so you'll see what I'm talking about, because you guys probably call it something different. You know, let me look. So here's a bunch of them. I'm going to, can you let me share the screen and I'll show you?
I just did.
Okay. So, all right. So this is rock candy, right? It looks like crystals. See?
Yeah, it's good. It's like it's a lollipop, something like that.
That is rock candy. That looks exactly like, pull up your quartz crystal you had there a second ago.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the way the formations are.
I don't know if
right? It's almost exactly the same. And so like they understand that it is our natural intuition to be attracted to things with this kind of makeup. And so that's why we have this. Like if you look at like salt also crystallizes into rocks, but in general, salt is much more matte. It doesn't have that shiny prismatic kind of effect, right? So like it's a different kind of thing, but the things they want us to be attracted to and appeal to us, they give us disco balls, right? Like the disco ball does like that same prismatic thing, but it's like with a piece of metal foil that makes it happen. So there's all that kind of stuff. These are obviously like very important, right? Like it's a very important early or natural technology of some sort. And there have been 1 million copies, mimics, some of them good and some of them not so good over all this time. And then the other thing that's really interesting, and I've talked about this before, but like I took this class from the Vesica Institute. One of the presenters was Ibrahim Karim, who's his whole thing is biogeometry. And he's talking about how if you have a, let me get the kind of thing he showed. Let me get it, grab it real fast. Okay, so he has these pendulums that are made of the same material as this, right? Now this is like, this isn't quartz crystal, I don't think. I don't know what exactly the material is, but this is the kind of thing that like if I go outside, the sun is gonna hit it and it's gonna rainbows all over the ground and right around. So his whole, and I can see him even in here because there's sun coming in. Yeah. So right here on my desk, there's like 20 little rainbows, right? So there's the reflective side, the light side, and then he's talking about in the shadow side, so the other side, not the side where the light's the shadow side, right? There's like invisible colors, and those invisible colors are sort of doorways to other dimensions, right? That literally, like, we all think of it like, oh, you have to go to some special place where there's a portal or some technology to access other realities or dimensions. Like, I think you could probably, if you found like the right angle in your own backyard with the sun hitting it a certain way so that it reflected one way and then shadowed another way where you could still see some of the prismatic effect, that you could probably figure out a way to like open a path into a parallel reality. Like that is, I think that's how it works. Like, I think this idea that there's only like one way to do stuff is wrong. And so I think crystals are a big part of that, right? Because it's kind of like nature's own really high intensity technology, right? Like I think that they can do like all the same things that like these crazy quantum computers and like really mechanistic complicated technologies can do. You just have to know more in order to be able to use them. You can't just push the buttons and enter the code. You have to understand what time of day, what light source you need, what maybe sounds or music or vibration, what maybe food you need to eat to prepare your body like to become resonant with something else, right? Like I think there's probably like a number of things that have to be lined up, but these kinds of this one I don't know if it's natural, but there's actually a vibration coming off of it, so maybe it really is. I think that there's that possibility, and I think that you have places in the world where like Michael likes to talk about this area where the Herkimer diamonds come from, right? And maybe this is an area where there is some sort of entrance to an inner earth and a crossover point, or even just the vibration around the area there lends to a sort of thinning. And maybe when that vibration is occurring, there's the opportunity for movement between realities. But it seems to me that the crystals and the rock formations are evidence of that. Like I don't know if they're the tool by which it happens, or if they're the remnants of the fact that it happens, or that it did happen. I don't know which position it plays, but they're very important and very related, I think, to temporal and spatial transition, like being able to move through the various levels of reality.
I think the idea of portals, it's been like maturing my comprehension of it, my understanding. Because we get perhaps this first like kind of fantastic idea of like a doorway that you go through and you, but it seems like for example now in a few days there's this 12/12 date, and it's also considered a portal, and I'm going to do a sound bath on that precise day with a group of people in order to use the energy of that day to go through that portal, and in particular this time we're going to use it to connect with our higher self and to expand that connection, and so and I did one last month also in the 11/11 for attracting the reality of our dreams. So it's like you go through a portal, but you don't realize it in a way. It's like, nothing happened, it seems, but then as the days go by or the hours and stuff, you start noticing that reality, that there has been a shift in it's again, like I was saying with the crystals, it's very subtle. It's not like, suddenly I have a brother which I didn't have. No, it's not that extreme, the transition, but you feel differently, and you see different stuff happening, more synchronicities, more of the intention that you had put before crossing that portal. You see more of it starting to manifest. And so it's been this idea of portals has been developing within me recently, more than it had before. And you talk about the for example the places where there is lots of crystal deposits. I don't know exactly the name in English. You talk about that, and it makes me think that in a way, how we our 3D reality, you could say it's an expression or a lower density or more condensed expression of something that's more ethereal, more astral, let's say, to use certain terms. I don't know if I'm very correct in the way that I'm expressing it.
No, you're doing great.
But it seems for me that like everything that happens here in the 3D is like something in a kind of higher octave of reality piercing in a way through the veil. So like, and like, and even ourselves, our bodies, our lives are an expression of something that has gone into matter,
Yeah.
and will, when it goes out of matter, from our perspective it seems like death, for example.
Yeah.
And even so, even creativity and painting, like we were just watching, looking at a painting that I did, um, those things, creating it, in a way it's like you're helping something
Yeah.
pop into this reality. So they are also portals in a way. Somebody told me several years ago about mandalas and stuff like that. Oh, they're portals, and I was like, this person is crazy. But now I have understood portals in a different way, and I'm
They
like,
totally are. They're total mandalas are totally portals. Yeah.
and but it's like, how the how do they work is what's been evolving for
Yeah.
me. Like, on the first hand, it's like, well, now you live in a world where that mandala exists, where before it didn't. So of course it's a different world. And what higher thing is that 3D thing an expression of? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to close this idea with the diamonds, I think where there is, what do you call it, quarries, or I don't know what the name would be, where there's
Yeah.
lots of,
Quarries are just, yeah. So sometimes it's in like mines or certain mountains or hills, but quarries works too. Yeah.
I'm looking for the translation. I know the word in Spanish. Yeah, deposits. Okay. So
Deposits, yeah.
um, places that are deposits of crystals, I think, going along the lines of this stuff that I was just trying to express, they are like, there is something very special, very particular that has manifested in the 3D,
Yeah.
in the shape of those crystals, and it's no wonder that they can create the rainbow, like you're speaking. Not
Yeah.
many things have that possibility. I mean, you drop light on my face and it doesn't create the rainbow, but you do it on certain crystals and it does. So it's something, a very particular characteristic that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very interesting, and it very much is related to something that is outside of our ability to understand, like the various levels of reality or timelines or things like that. This is just like a weird, like aside from this, but I recently found out about this condition. A client of mine is related to somebody that has a condition that is called cryoglobulinemia. And what this is it's like their blood becomes less fluid. It like gels up or starts to crystallize. And what happens when this person has it's an attack of this is they start losing their ability. They think they're in a different time. Like they think they're in the 70s, or they think that, like, right? So there's something about crystallization and time that are connected, right? Like about when something goes from being fluid or liquid into crystals, that sort of solidifies a certain time into that space. I don't know that I completely understand it, but I think this is a really important alchemical process that we begin to really understand, both for understanding the world around us, but also our place and our position in it and how to move through it. There's a couple of other things I want to say based on what you said. I don't know if you ever watched, did you watch Fringe?
You what's the name, you talked about it last time, and you asked me to, not you asked me, what's the name, you recommended it.
Yeah.
So I watched, I started watching the first season. I didn't finish it, the first season, so I'm probably not very deep into the center of the thing, but you can go ahead and talk about it freely. Yeah.
So what's interesting is in the final season of Fringe, there's this scene where Walter is going into a pocket universe. He's created a parallel, like another universe, or he's figured out how to tap into this other universe to be able to hide some information there, okay? To hide it from the observers. And this sort of pattern that he, steps in, that he does with his feet to do it, is very similar to a video that I watched recently about how to draw a Masonic floor, like the floor of the Freemason Lodge, right? So then I've also been doing a lot of research into stuff based on some things I'm learning from these FPV Angel YouTube channel that's fascinating. And I've been looking into the work of Walter Russell, which also relates to a lot of things that we are talking about here today. I'm reading his book, The Universal One. I recommend people, if are interested in these kinds of topics we're talking about, to check that out. But a lot of his diagrams also look like the setup of a Masonic floor. So I think probably one of the things that they're doing in the inner circles, the high levels of the Freemasonry, is they understand that you can basically create a reality around yourself if you understand angles of light and resonances and then certain like geometrical patterns that you can create. Like I think you can basically create a Masonic floor around you anywhere you go, and then that provides the ability to move between various levels of reality. And I think that's probably what's actually going on in the high levels in the inner circle of Masonry.
And the
right?
Masonic floor is the checkerboard, right? The chess
Well, so
board.
here, let me see. Let me see if I can find. Let me see if I can find it real fast.
I've been listening to one of Walter Russell's books called The Secret of Light. It's kind of hard to follow. But in a way, it's like he's expressing things that feel intuitively true for me. But he's like very deep, so I get lost sometimes. I find myself like going backwards 5-10 seconds like 100 times to like catch an idea. He goes like, well, if this, then that, and then that other thing, and I kind of get lost in the middle of those reasonings. So I go back and eventually it kind of starts clicking.
Yeah, it's complicated. I'm going to read that one too, but I just started with the Universal One because that was the one that I kind of first sort of fell on. It's also just interesting to look at his drawings and his graphics. Like you can just Google Walter Russell and then go to images and you see all this stuff. But I have this short video about the drawing of a Masonic floor, and I'm going to show you. It's just 1 minute. And I'm sure you've heard me, since you watch a lot of stuff, when I talk also about this 4-lobe shape that I see everywhere, right? So it's also in the drawing of the Masonic floor. So I'm going to just play this for you guys real quick. All right, here we go. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, sacred geometry, right?
Right? It's just all these basically geometries. If you go look in the Walter Russell images of his graphs of what he thinks the machine that basically our Earth is, it looks like this, right? And if you look at like all of these patterns that I've been showing that appear in all of this sort of penetration of the levels of reality, they all show that 4-lobe shape and the various different sacred geometries, right? So I think that like that is, you know, having a really foundational understanding of the geometries that certain vibrations create, and then this sort of like correlation to the spectrum of light generated by like prismatic reflective surfaces, shadows, all that kind of stuff. Because you find whenever you go into any esoteric place, you find this combination of things, right? So I think that like any place where the proper circumstances are created, like can become a machine that moves you through worlds, right? And so I think there's a couple of ways to do it. So I think you can have a chemical substance, right? That its atomic makeup mirrors the geometry that we're doing there, or you can draw the geometry, or you can make a sound that cymatics create that geometry through vibration, right? I think there's a number of ways to do it. I don't think there's just one, right? Jeff and I were looking up stuff. We were looking up the atomic structure of hexafluoride. And it had this sort of, you know, when you're looking at things that are atoms, it's like the sticks with the balls on it and the different, so it was like that. But I noticed that it created a certain geometry. So then I looked up the geometry of hexafluoride, and it looked a lot like the Metatron's cube, right? And so then I found a drawing of the Metatron's cube that literally showed a magician's hands penetrating through the graph and coming into like a different reality, right? So I think that there's like all these different ways to accomplish the same thing. And you have various practitioners, sages, wise people, alchemists, witches, whatever, you know, technologies throughout the ages that achieve it through different ways. And now you have like the Alice computer or the quantum computers that are doing it through code, right? But like they come up with a string of code that creates the same parameters and conditions as the drawing of the Masonic, you know, like I think that's what we're dealing with.
So, yeah, what's happening? I guess we could say that, and I have something else, but what seems to be happening is that people for many years, different groups have found ways of creating reality through using these different methods, perhaps, that you're speaking, and of course there are many different methods of doing it, but I guess some of them are perhaps more effective or more efficient, and they can work at a larger scale.
Yeah.
And we were just talking. It's kind of synchronistic that we end up with well, in a way. I have this glass right next to me with the.
Yeah. Yep.
I just realized.
They're giving you the hint. Like, this is the thing. And this goes to your fear about the like censorship and all this kind of stuff, right? Like in some ways, this whole censorship, like I'm against censorship, but I actually find some of what's going on humorous because they're literally, like today, YouTube is literally saying, you can't talk about the election or you're going to get your video taken down. Right? If you say that there was election fraud, you're going to get your, like that's tacitly, they're acknowledging that there was election fraud by saying that you can't say it, right? Kind of thing, you know? So all these people are up in arms, but the few places I've figured that you can't find any of these magical truths about reality is when you're looking into the election and when you're looking into the fucking coronavirus. All the magic disappears and everything becomes fucking stupid and boring, right? The clues to all this stuff is all around you. My fucking Wi-Fi box has the 4-lobe shape on it. My fucking comforter has it on there. The tissue box, the toilet paper, I could bring all these things in here, right? And I've showed this, I think, on one of the shows, but this is, I live in my grandmother's house and we cleaned out her garage. The very last thing I found in the garage was a metal imprint of this 4-lobe shape. Almost like she was trying to leave me the clue that pay attention to this and the rest is kind of whatever, right? So the clues are all around us, right? And like they're also like if you can let go of like we're being censored and attacked and blah 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 blah. Like it's almost like the system is tired of people being distracted with dumb shit, so they're not going to let you talk about it anymore. And either you can continue to waste time by insisting on finding other ways to talk about it, or you can like go with the shit that's hidden in plain sight that nobody is actually talking about. That is actually interesting, right? Like, you know, like, and so it's that, like that's on your cup. One of the things now, everywhere we go, if we stay in a hotel, if we stay in an Airbnb, if we end up in a restaurant, we fucking find that shape somewhere in the place where we are. And so to me, that's like my clue that I'm on the right path. I never find that shape in the video about the election or the coronavirus.
Yeah, and you know what? Also, well, two things, because something else came up. But on the first hand, we were just speaking about the connection between this symbol and the Masonic floor. And just, I don't know, 3-4 days ago, one of our former presidents died, and it's always been known that he was a Mason. And I could confirm it the other day when he died, because I don't know if it was that the Masons here sent out a whatever. or simply that the newspaper printed that he was one. So it was like finally kind of confirmed, the hearsay that he was one. Um, and I don't know what's really their role. But then the other thing is that because this four-lobed shape, it feels kind of like the flower of life, or one of those symbols, right? The seed of life or something.
They
And
don't tell you about that one though. If you go research sacred geometry, they'll tell you about the seed of life, the flower of life, the Vesica Pisces, the Sri Yantra, the on and on, different stuff. They don't tell you about this one. It's called the quatrefoil, right? And I think the reason that they, like, I don't know what the reason is. When I know, I'll tell you. I'm sure that soon I will know. But like when I have like those really intense inner psychedelic visions of like hyperspace, it's made up of this. It's not made up of the other thing. So it's not that the other thing doesn't ever exist in the visions, the flower of life and all that, because it does. But those ones don't have the full spectrum of all the colors on it. Like those ones are more of like a closed system, and this provides for like a more of an open system that is endless. Like I don't know how else to explain it. I'm not like an expert on the lingo or the like working technology of sacred geometry, but you will never hear, at least I've never heard any of the people out there who are supposedly experts on sacred geometry talk about the quatrefoil. You'll hear about the quatrefoil from artists and in some like esoteric religious scholars and things like that, but you don't, and then in secret societies, but you don't hear about it when you go, like I was really digging hard into sacred geometry for a long time, trying to find a lot of answers. And I found a lot of beauty and a lot of interesting things and a lot of like information that was interesting, but it wasn't giving me information that helped me penetrate through to another space. And when I really started to focus in more on this one, I started to understand a lot more. And so it's all around you with very little information or acknowledgement that it exists.
And you know what? The first time I got like acquainted with sacred geometry or one of those patterns of the seed of life or whichever one it was when I was in school. This friend of mine, one day he showed me, he had drawn, I think it was the flower, or I can't remember, maybe it was the quatrefoil, I'm not sure. He had made the drawing and showed me with protractor is the name, with the thing how to draw it. And I was like, oh wow, you create, it looks like a flower and everything is made with circles. It was so pretty for me. But the funny thing now, as I'm an adult, I connect the dots that kid is the, I don't know, great grandson or something like that of a very, very, very relevant or very important alchemist or hermeticist or whatever that lived here. And I don't really think that anybody particularly taught him that. I don't know how he got to it, right? But for me, I think it was like in his DNA or in somewhere inside him, and he just one day just screwing around, he ended up drawing it, and he found it interesting, and he showed it to me, and that was the first time I saw it. And then for over a decade or whatever, or even more, I never heard about that until one day, sacred geometry. I looked into the subject, and suddenly that figure appeared, and I was like, wow, look, this is what my friend taught me when I was like 5-6 years old. This is incredible.
No, I think you're right about it was just an expression of his genetics, right? Like I think, and it's entirely possible that certain geometric shapes are more related to people of certain ethnicities, right? So maybe for whatever my genetics are, the four-lobe, the quatrefoil is more significant than one of the other shapes, but for someone else, the other shape may lead to the answers. So I you know, it's kind of like if I go looking for answers to my health problems in someone like the Chinese medicine, right? Even though Chinese medicine can offer a lot of things, like it isn't necessarily designed for people that were of Jewish and European descent, right? So you're going to find some answers, but there's certain things that might not work for, just like Western medicine may not really be good for people who are indigenous people and whatever, right? Like it's not good for anyone probably, but so I think that there's that as well. And what you are talking about he seems to just naturally understand, oh, look what you're supposed to do. You do the circles together like this, and you get this flower, and you can keep going and make more and more flowers. And, it's very interesting.
And one last thing connected to this, in one of my psychedelic experiences, you made me connect just now the dots. I think I saw that in a way also, because when I with my eyes closed, it was like, okay, a completely different reality. But with my eyes open, for a moment I opened my eyes, and the world was like made of what I would say pixels, but the pixels were like bubbles that were like close together, interlinked in between each of them, and they were like rainbowy, or like how a bubble made out of soap is kind of reflects a rainbow as well. It was like all the world, all the, like a matrix of bubbles. It was something very interesting, and the person that was with me saw the same thing, but for her it was cubes rather than spheres.
So it's a couple of things, right? So that is like you've watched like cymatics and stuff where like they play music and the sand organizes itself onto the plate into geometry. So like our reality is really vibrating all the time, but we've become so dense that we only see these solid objects. That vibration is happening all the time. So there's like a natural wallpaper to our reality that is made up of that. Right. I think that's why it's on the Wi-Fi router, right? Like, like it's showing that like they're trying to mimic, the sort of wallpaper of reality. So it's always there. And you can it's like the background wallpaper of things. And when you go sky watching here in the desert in Southern California, you see the ships like come through the wallpaper. Like it's like, wow, that's and they have to go in a certain sort of geometry to come through the vibration, right? Like all the different levels of reality have their own vibration. And I think the sort of shell, or, if there's any kind of like dome or firmament, it's not ice or glass. It's a vibratory electromagnetic one that the geometry of that vibration is that shape. And then you bring to it your own like perception of things, right? Like, and so for you, like, you may see things in like a more soft, elegant way. She may be a more like angular, technologically, sort of driven it can be whatever, like, her family's heritage could have built homes that were more angular, where your family could have lived in one originally that was more of like a dome shape, soft round corners. It could be something like that, or just the mood you're in, right? Or what other thing you ate makes the small little changes, but essentially we're all seeing different versions of the same thing, right? There, like, there's also like, when people have a psychedelic experience, you see a lot of symbols, right? And like somebody who's like comes from a European background might see more Gnostic symbols, whereas somebody who comes from like a South American, Central American culture may see some of the more like indigenous, figures of whatever, of that reality, or Asian people might see some of those kinds of things. It's like shows you the same information, but through the filter that your brain will be able to understand and accept it, So, yeah. All right. So should we, what we're going to do, like Rafa and I decided we're going to like have a conversation like this once a month or something. And he's going to ask me some questions, and then I'm going to ask him some questions. And like, I told him I want to know some things about what it's like to live in Uruguay, right? Because a lot of people I know are talking about moving to a different state or a different country or whatnot. And I think we sometimes have fantasies about, oh, it's going to be so wonderful because it's different than here, which we don't like right now, right? And then, and some of those things may be true and other things may be totally wrong. But I thought it would be really cool to like, for his audience, and then for the people who follow me, to get to hear us kind of talk about what it's like sort of living where we live and what it might be like for someone else to be there. So I wanted to ask you some questions about Uruguay, because it popped up when in a discussion with someone about fuck, if we decide to move to another country, where are we going to move to, right? So because this is the reality of the moment now, like, what is it like there right now? Are the people there as like crazy as it is here? Like, what are the rules? Like, what are the rules? First of all, where do you live in Uruguay? Do you live
I
in
live,
Montevideo, or where do you live?
yeah, in the capital, Montevideo.
Okay. So what is the rules there? Most
The
of the
normal
rules aren't
behavior,
really,
yeah,
huh?
the accepted behavior.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it is where you are, but I kind of get a certain impression. Here, for example, I remember one day, when was it, in like, perhaps in like April or in August, maybe, I'm not, no, probably in April, I think it was. So quite quick, they started not allowing people into the supermarket without the mask.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I went in, and somebody stopped me, and they told me, "Oh no, you can't go in without the mask." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I continued walking, thinking like it was just a warning, like for next time or whatever. And they went, "No, no, no, you have to buy one." And so
Yeah.
there I went like an idiot, and I bought one. And yeah, since then it's always, when you go to the supermarket, the mask. And then when you go to the doctor, for example, they have those seats where you're waiting, and they put like the police, the yellow
Yeah.
tape. Stop, it says. And it's like one seat you can, and the next is a yellow tape. um, then and you have to wear the mask, and they make you put what's it called in English,
Hand
alcohol in
sanitizer.
the hand sanitizer, yeah. And then, for example, something else that caught my attention is outside schools, or like preschools and stuff like that, when parents go to fetch their kids, outside of the school, on the sidewalk, they've painted feet,
Yeah.
a couple of foot, like at a certain distance. uh, Anything of this, is it kind of similar to how it's there?
Yeah. So, I mean, yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's different in different states. The rules are slightly different. So you guys are at least having school. Like most places here, there's not even school right now. They started
Right.
having school again, but then they took it away again.
Mm.
So most of the school stuff is online. So yeah, here pretty much it's most places there's no laws. There's not been any one state, one city, no place has passed any laws. They just keep saying that it's the rules,
Right.
saying it's the mandate, and
That's
people are doing it.
what's most crazy for me, is that they do like a decree or something like that. I don't know, that they would have the power,
That's what it is.
that
It's a decree. Yeah.
that somebody in could have the authority to just say, okay, people now have to do this. It's so
Right.
crazy. You would never think that that was possible. And I was thinking some other some other crazy things here. But what I think is, well, yeah, you go in the street, and nowadays I'm seeing kind of maybe like 50-50 people, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's more people with mask on the street. What calls my attention the most is like young people, under 20. You sometimes see them going with the mask, as if it's the something natural. That's kind of scary to see
Yeah.
such young people, because if it's older people, well, okay, they might be scared because of their age or whatever, or because they've been indoctrinated for longer. But you seeing young people comply with those things, it's yeah, it really caught my attention. um, what else could I tell you? I think for a moment, I know that they closed the borders between the different. Here it's not called states, it's departments. they
Yeah.
they closed so you wanted to go on a weekend to another state, and they wouldn't let you. um, and I think now they're going to do something similar. Something that I like is that I'm not hearing the noise of as many airplanes as it used
Yeah.
to be. That's
Yeah. I live near
pretty,
the airport. Same thing here. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty nice. I mean, because before, there was a point where I was feeling like the airplanes, like they were flying very, very, very low. I don't know why. I'm not close to an airport, but I was feeling them like lower and lower and lower year after year. I don't know why they started doing lower flights. Um, so yeah, in that sense, that's something that's, I don't know how airlines, yeah, how they are going to survive this in a business way. Um, and yeah, so borders closed. I think, yeah, the people that can get in and out of the country, I don't know if right now they're closed but I heard that they expect to close the borders of the country again, as they did at the start of the thing. Um, and yeah, there's been this change in the media here. Even though, like I said, I don't watch TV. When I go perhaps to my parents' house or stuff like that, I get a short glimpse, and I can see a very big picture through a few examples. And I see slowly how the media has been going more more like basic, or more like for babies, you know, like
Yeah.
loud people and bright colors, and speaking stupid things that aren't very really useful or important for people. And now with this COVID, it's like it feels like it's kind of virtue signaling, you know, saying
Yeah.
that you're worried about it, and how dangerous it is. It's, I don't know how much the people in the media are consciously uh, spewing out that narrative, and how much they are controlled. I mean, how conscious are they that they are being controlled is my question.
Yeah.
How much a part of it they are on a conscious level. Uh, like there was this person who is an actress here, I think, which in, she went to this. You have these programs there that are like celebrities or pseudo celebrities go and they talk about whatever's happening in their life, very in a very sensational way. Do you have that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's I was I went to the hospital for a checkup, and they on the they have TVs, and they put that stuff there. And just at that moment, this girl actress was talking about her dealing with, I guess she had COVID, and she was talking about what it was, the experience for her and whatever. I didn't really pay attention, but immediately it felt like manipulation, you know.
Okay. So this is so it sounds like
Mm.
it's pretty much exactly the same there as it is here. So the last time we talked, I don't think we really talked about COVID at all.
No.
But the very first time we did a conversation was like at the beginning of all of this, I think, right? And then it was your things were still pretty normal there. They hadn't gotten all crazy yet, right? Like it was already crazy here, but you were like asking me, you were like, wow, this sounds crazy and whatever. And you were like, yeah, I don't know. They just did something for a couple weeks and now everything seems fine. So over the course of all these months, what wasn't a very big deal where you are became a big deal. So that's part of why this is so interesting. Because in my head, like I thought you were going to say, oh no, everything here is not pretty normal, like blah, blah, blah. But now there is just like here. Are the restaurants open or closed where you live?
I think they're open right now, but again, I heard that they are planning to close restaurants, pubs, and gyms. I think they're going to close those.
So it's exactly the same.
Yeah, and people, yeah, because I mean, I think it's important that we realize that whatever is happening, not just with the COVID, but everything that's behind the scenes, all the thing I call the focus groups and the think tanks and all that.
Yeah.
It's a global thing.
Yeah, totally.
That perhaps they test it out perhaps first in the US or in Europe or stuff like that, or Asia, I don't know, and it slowly starts dripping into because
Yeah.
Uruguay is such a small country.
Such a small, yeah.
It's like a third or fourth stage of the development or the of the
Yeah.
thing, I think. But yeah, eventually it's happening everywhere. So like what is the globalism, the negative, aspect of the globalism, like Starbucks, McDonald's, whatever, it's all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to address one more thing you said, and then I need to go because I have a client in a little bit at 2:00. But you said about you don't know what's going to happen to the airline industry, and I think this is going to circle us back to what we were talking about earlier, where I'm like, this system is so stupid it wants to be figured out, right? Like the way when you have like the governor of California being like, everybody stay home, but I'm going to go have a fancy 12-course meal and I'm not going to wear a mask, right? It's like obvious that like this is a clown show, right? But like it's like when the child who stole the cookie wants to get caught or whatever, right? I think one of the things with this, one of the big threats is this idea of travel, whether it's because they shut everything down or if they're going to say, oh, if you want to travel, you have to take a vaccine. Right? Rather than like, sure, one way to look at it is this is an unfair restriction on our freedoms. And I'm not denying the truth of that. Like that is very true, like in one version of reality. And then because this is the situation we're in, while I think it's important we acknowledge that that's happening, another way to look at it is like, okay, so like maybe like I need to figure out a different way to travel. And we were earlier talking about traveling between dimensions and portals and things like that. I do think teleportation, time travel, like spatial displacement, all this kind of stuff is a reality. I do think that's something that's achievable and attainable. And I think that we live in this magnificent universe that's alive. Like the universe and the earth is alive, right? And it understands that all of these possibilities exist. And partly because of our comfort level, particularly here in America, but it sounds like around the rest of the world, we've become very complacent. We've stopped trying to figure things out for ourselves or do things for ourselves. We just do it the way that they say is most efficient or cheapest or fastest or whatever, right? And so it's almost like the system, the overall system, I'm not talking about like the globalist political control system. The reason, like people say, like, why would Mother Nature or God or whatever allow this to happen? But maybe the allowing it to happen is a challenge to us to figure out our own methods of travel, right? Our own ways, like rediscovering our magic. We don't need to depend on Elon Musk or Richard Branson or any of this bullshit to go places, right? Like, and I think that that's like a flip side of all of this challenges we're having right now is we have a lot more time to, and I don't mean this in the gross way, play with ourselves, right? Like to start tinkering with our relationship to reality and see how many places we can go. Like I had this conversation with my dad the other day, and I was sort of joking, but sort of not, right? Because my dad loves to travel. Like he goes at least on 2 or 3 international trips every year and 2 or 3 domestic travels, right? But he hasn't left his house in 9 months because he's scared, because he's old and he has diabetes and he's had heart problems and, he has a girlfriend who's overly paranoid about that stuff. So he doesn't ever go anywhere, and they canceled all their trips. And, like he's, what if he's already 78? Like, what if they never travel again? So I just mentioned to him, because he had sent me some pictures of his trip from the year before, what was showing like all these cool cathedrals they were in that have like all the psychedelic stuff on the top. And I just told him, I was like, well, if you're never going to get to go look at these cathedrals again, you can just eat mushrooms and see the same thing, because I saw that before you ever showed me the pictures. And for the first time in his life, he expressed interest in that, right? Like, not like, oh, tomorrow he's going to eat mushrooms, but like, usually he just thought it was a stupid thing, right? Because, my stepbrother was in a lot of trouble, did a lot of those kinds of drugs. He thought it was just like a crazy thing. But if you explain to him that, no, like I seeing the same things that you see on the art that you go look at in these museums all over the world, suddenly it was like, oh, like he just had a different look on his face when I told him about it than ever before. So, I think this is I'm not suggesting that it would be a wonderful thing for my father to do mushrooms. I think it just might blow his mind and it might be a stretch too far. But I think this idea of considering other ways to travel than just going to the airport is the next stage of us developing some of our superpowers, you know? So maybe the airline industry is like, oh, well, right? Like, you know, like that's, you know, that phase of like having to fly around in a fake bird. I mean, they make the airplane look like the bird. The bird doesn't look like the airplane. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know. That's just my thoughts with your comment on what's going to happen with the airline industry. I think it's going to be obsolete soon.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, this was fun. Thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. It's been really great. Lots of area covered. I mean, there's so much to explore with all this, not just with the current situation of the world, but with all the different threads, you know, that you're exploring on your show, and that I'm interested in myself also. There's so much ground to cover, but yeah, I think taking a deep breath sometimes, and like calming down, and trying to not trying, but allowing for the information to just settle, and
yeah,
like now I feel very much to go outside and lay in the sun or something.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. To just let it all sink in. But
Yeah.
it was great. Thank you for reminding me of the painting, and for letting me show it to you. I mean, you're the first person I've showed it, other than myself and my girlfriend, and
Yeah.
my
It's very
family,
cool.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, yeah. So we will
We'll
talk
do it again next
to do
month.
it again. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. That's great. So please, if you would like to share where people can find your stuff, and then we can say bye.
Cool. You can find all of my work on the on YouTube. The YouTube channel is just my name, Emily Moyer. Some of my work still appears on the Off Planet Media YouTube channel, but all of it appears on my personal YouTube channel. If you like my work and you'd like to see the extended shows and some things I do that are just for patrons and whatnot, you can support me at patreon.com/Off Planet Media. And yeah, I also I do nutrition consultations and life coaching. So if someone's interested in any of that, you can contact me at emilycmoyer@protonmail.com. And you'll be able to find me here once a month with Rafa, chatting about things physical, metaphysical, and all else.
Thank
All
you.
right. You're
See
welcome.
you.
See you next time.